Standing here, Mr. Rick Schmidt, Vice President, Chief of Operations of National Parts Depot. He's got some really cool cars here. One of them being a Trans Am that supposedly came from Burt Reynolds. We're going to just kind of get the whole story and history of this car.
There's been more than a few Trans Ams that have come and gone across the auction block in the last 10 or 20 years that are attributed with Burt Reynolds, and some of those cars are cars that Burt that passed through his ownership later in his life.
Correct.
The one we're standing in front of here is one that Burt Reynolds owned in the 1970s and may very well be the first Trans Am that he ever owned. It's a 1978 Y84 Special Edition. It is PHS documented, and I've got the build sheet too that has a handwritten on it, a pink, special pink build sheet. It's the very first Y84 assembled in 1970.
Holy grail Trans Am.
First
sure.
Y84 off the line, and as such, Pontiac ceremoniously gifted it to Burt Reynolds as a thank you for the success of the recently released in 1977 Smokey and the Bandit movie.
I'm sure there's a lot of Trans Am specialists that would kill to have this car.
The president of Pontiac promised Burt a brand new Trans Am every year.
That's a pretty good
and
promise.
This was the very first installation on that promise. Not only do I have the story to tell that this is the first Y84 and that it was given to Burt, I've actually got the original state of Florida title with the car in his name from back in the day, and I've got a 1979 Florida state license plate registration in his name down in Jupiter.
So every bit of proof you need, you've got all the evidence is
not
there.
only that, but if I'm remembering right, 2012, I was asked to bring the car down to Jupiter for a grand opening of a large restoration and speed shop down there, and Burt Reynolds was their guest of honor, and they had the idea that they wanted to reunite him with the car. I trailer the car down. They asked me to bring my documentation with me, and the reason they asked that is because Burt refused to be photographed with the car unless I could prove that it was his old car. So the owners of the shop asked me for my folder. I hand it to them. They walk into their offices where Burt is kind of staged up. He hasn't come out into the crowd yet. And they come out about 15 minutes later and hand me my folder back, and I was like, oh, he's like, he looked through it, he says, well, I'll be damned, that's my old car.
That's crazy, man, that's awesome.
So I got a picture of him on the dashboard posing next to the car, and got to meet him and had a very nice, warm, brief discussion with him where I promised him that I wasn't going to be exploiting his photographs to run the car across the
the Barrett Jackson or something like that.
I've got no plans to ever sell it. It'll be my daughter's problem to see what they do with it someday. And he gave me a big hug and told me thank you, and he's very, very warm. Yeah, and the story with this car is that we know that he owned it all the way up through 1984. Okay. And then in 1984, he sold it to his personal assistant, whose name was Lamar Jackson.
Oh my gosh.
And Lamar Jackson was a friend of his. I believe he was a retired state of Georgia highway patrolman. He had a couple of parts in the movie.
Correct.
Smokey and the Bandit.
See, I didn't know that.
So he took ownership of the car after Burt, and I've got documentation of that too. And then he put it up for sale with the help of some Vehicle Services, which is a Hollywood place that provides cars to all the movie studios. They went to auction it in the early 90s. Oddly enough, the car was being represented as one of the movie cars.
Oh, yeah.
So the car had a big red flag waving over it because everybody was like, hey, how can a 78 Trans Am be a movie car when the movie was released in 77?
Correct.
So my father was at the auction, and nobody was wanting to bid on it because they all thought it was a fraud. And my dad had just taken the time to go down through the file of paperwork that was with the car on the radiator support. And then towards the end, all of a sudden he sees this original title and this original plate registration. And my dad thinks to himself, it might not be the movie car, but it's something.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like almost, I would say it's just as important as a movie car in a
so
sense.
He wound up winning it at that auction, and he just stuffed it away in a storage unit out in Colorado where he spends his summers.
Okay.
So it was in a nice dry climate, and it stayed there for probably about 6 or 7 years until we finally brought it back east here to Florida, and we've had it here ever since.
Absolute pristine condition as well.
It's in beautiful shape.
Beautiful, like a piece of art.
It's got over 40,000 miles on it, and I'm assuming that most of those miles were put on by either Burt or Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, so you know they're enjoyed. enjoyable miles.
Yeah, yeah.
And not
I'm
get-
also pretty sure because Burt used to film orange juice commercials in the state of Florida, and I remember one commercial that was taken at his ranch where you could see the back end of a Trans Am poking out of the garage, and I'm pretty sure it was.
So this car may or may not have had a little bit of screen time as well.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
Smokey and the Bandit, but
It
the Bandit was involved
It was in
in
one
it.
of those orange juice commercials.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. That's a lot of cool history, and the fact that you know so much history on all the vehicles that you have in your collection just shows how true of a collector you are. Not
Yeah.
somebody just trying to get rich off vehicles like you just love.
I remember all the backstories for every car that we've accumulated in here at the expense of probably forgetting a lot of things that I ought to
I'm
remember.
sure. So much to remember.
You can only keep so much on the hard drives. So.
So cool.